just here enjoying my breakfast sandwich and some tea. But I thought I'd take this chance outside of my sewing room and let you know about what I'm planning to do here next. I want to start a series called Learn With Me. Now, I've sewn for years and knitted and all kinds of other projects and crafts, and I decided that I wanted to learn something new. I want to get into more garment sewing. For years, I have sewn bags, tote bags, purses, zip project bags, things like that that don't require a lot of fitting. So I wanted to expand my horizons a little bit, and as in any new thing, it takes practice and it takes patience. And so I thought I'd bring you along on my journey through some garment sewing and some other new things that I've wanted to learn along the way. So this series, like I said, is going to be called Learn With Me. And it's going to go through my garment sewing journey, as well as several other crafts that I've just started or want to start, different things. So, you know, my channel that I am a little bit of everything, a hodgepodge, like I say, of crafts. I have a lot of hobbies, and I like to share those with you. My reason on this mainly was because I run into so many friends and so many acquaintances and stuff that will go, "Oh, you're so talented. Yeah, I could never do that." And it's like, no, yes, you could. You're selling yourself short. So I wanted to kind of show you kind of my process in starting any new thing and how you kind of ease into it. And you got to stop telling yourself, "I can't," and say, "Maybe I could," or "Yes, I can," type of thing. I usually am out and about or at craft sales, at flea markets, wherever I happen to be, or even at the store, and I see something and I say to myself, you know, I wonder if I could do that. Or, I mean, even on TV or even in a movie, you know, there's a craft or something that somebody's doing, and I'm like, I wonder if I can do that. Or it would be really interesting to research that thing and try it. So I've kind of going to put together different videos of what I am trying, what I've tried in the past, and kind of my process of learning or figuring out whether I even like a certain craft. So stay tuned on my journey here. I'm going to finish my breakfast and we will see you in the sewing room. Okay, so now that breakfast is over and we're in my little craft room, the Learn With Me series, this first installment is going to be basic beginner garment sewing. I was seeing things in stores, on cosplay, people that do cosplay, in historical reenactments and things like that. I was like, God, I wish I could sew garments. So I wanted to start sewing garments. And it's like, where do you start? Where do you start? Where do you start with anything? Just start. And surprise, you're going to mess up. And I'm going to mess up. Except that you don't have to mess up on camera. Okay, where I am starting. My thoughts on this were keep it simple. I want to learn some new skills. I want to have a useful garment that I'm proud to wear in public. You know, something that I want to, you know, to be able to be useful. That's my whole premise on making things and buying things and what have you, is I want that object to be useful to me, have a life. So my conclusion for this project, a camisole. I needed one in my wardrobe, learn how to use bias tape. I can learn seam finishing. I can learn how to alter pattern. It will improve some of the skills I already have, my hand sewing. It's a simpler project. I mean, not terribly simple. If you want something really simple, you wouldn't be making a garment, because it's got to fit you, you know. So this is about as simple as I could find, or what I could think of. And like I said, I needed one. Okay. Now, when you think of a camisole, when most people think of a camisole, they think of this. This, yes, camisole, cami, what have you. This is a great garment for, you know, if something that you need fitted underneath. It's if you want something to sleek out underneath, you don't want a whole lot of bulk. It's great for a top like this. Something that is more fitted, and you don't want any bulk or any bunching of fabric. Those ones lay nice and sleek. What I was looking for was something to go on under something like this. This is a flowy top. It's more flowy, so I wanted a camisole that was more flowy. I didn't want something tight or form-fitting. When I wear this, it's usually hot outside, it's muggy. I wanted something else that was going to be cool and flowy and not restrict. A lot of times the camisoles that are form-fitting have spandex in them, you know, more of a stretchy material. I wanted something more natural, like cotton. And so for this project, I've decided to use a cotton muslin, a light cotton muslin, but opaque enough that when you put it under here, it isn't going to be see-through. That's the kind of the whole purpose of wearing a camisole under something like this. This is very sheer, and I need added undergarments to make this appropriate to wear out and about. So I wanted something that was light and cool for the summer, and not form-fitted. So this project was a really good beginner project because it doesn't have a ton of fitting, because it doesn't have to fit really close. Okay, so take this down. All right, so then I needed a pattern. Okay, so I went online, found a free one, and printed it out, took my measurements, and found the closest size. Okay, so this, I'm going to show the back of it because it is not my work, someone else's work, but I found the pattern. I printed out the back and the front of the pieces, and had them taped together, because I printed them on printer paper, obviously. So then I made a mock-up. Okay, found my closest size, cut it out, made a mock-up. Yes, I made a mock-up. I was very, very happy that I did. Something in the past that, why my sewing turned out so terrible in the past is when I was a teenager, I bought the fabric, laid it out with the pattern, with my size that I thought, and cut it out and started sewing. Okay, and none of my things turned out very great. So, so that's pretty much why I ditched garment sewing. And now that I'm a little older and I want to get back into it, I've seen so many YouTubers and stuff, and they have always said, always make a mock-up. So I do that, and I take some of their tips as far as making the mock-up. Use cheap fabric. Use stuff that you know that you won't want to use later if you've inherited something, bought something, found something on a garage sale, or use bed sheets. I have, had sheets that we just, we don't have a bed that size anymore, or we've had them for a camper that we've sold, or what have you, that they're just laying around, and it's like, oh, I'll just use these, use those, buy them at garage sales, find them at thrift stores. They're cheap fabric that you can use for your mock-ups. When you do a mock-up, if it's a big item like this, and you do a mock-up, and you finally get it adjusted all to your size and what have you, and the mock-up's great, and transfer that mock-up to a paper pattern, or adjust the paper pattern to match that mock-up. That's perfect. And then take that fabric that you use for your mock-up, put it back in your stash for mock-ups, because you can use it for smaller pieces of other mock-ups. Use it, use it, use it until there is no purpose left in it. You know, that is the responsible way to do things. So anyway, okay, very glad that I did a mock-up, because I came across some glitches in the pattern. Okay, another reason why I'm showing the back of the pattern. Actually, I need the front. One of the things I found that I'm going to show you how to fix all these glitches in the pattern, because I ran across them. But this pattern, if you imagine this again, because this is like a mirror image of this, you can see that this comes to a point, and I'll show you how to fix that. That was my first thing that I noticed when I opened up the fabric after cutting this on the fold. This neckline came to a point at the bottom, and I wanted a rounded neckline. Not terribly a glitch, but if you want a rounded neckline, it's a glitch. Okay, and specifically they had said on the site that the pattern had been fixed because that happened, and it hadn't. At least not the link I used to print this one out. So the other thing that happened is both the back and the front pieces, and I've fixed this since, but I'll show you how it was. As you can see, that this will end up on the fold, and when you fold this out, it should have a nice even curve. Well, what happened here, or what it was before, is it came and it curved from the outside and went up. Okay, so just imagine if you would open that back out, and I'll maybe show you with a piece of paper here. We'll just fold a piece of paper in half here and grab, not my sewing scissors, paper scissors, and we'll show you. This is the fold of the fabric, okay? So if you have, I'll just draw it on here, the way that the pattern was drawn, like this, it was drawn like that, and it came up. If you cut that out, and you open it up, that's what the bottom of my fabric for my mock-up looked like. No, front and back, that's what happened. So luckily for me, when I made the mock-up, then I just kept going with the mock-up to test the length. It was too long. It was very, very long, a lot longer than I wanted it to hit on me. So what I was able to do was to round that off. I was able to take it and come to straight on instead of going up. I'll show you that way. Instead of going up, I was able to come straight into that edge. So I had a nice even rounded edge and not have a divot in the middle. Okay, and then I also found that it was very low. All I did was I made the mock-up, I sewed the side seams, I sewed the shoulder seams, and I put it on. Okay, and I found that the neckline hung way low, and it was too long. So I did two things. The first thing I did was I took and I brought the shoulders up. That meant shortening. I shortened the front of it by about 2 inches. I brought that shoulder seam up so that it wouldn't be as low here. And you can do that if your arm side, which is this depth from your shoulder to your armpit on the garment, is deep enough. If that would have come up too close here, I would have had to raise the neckline instead. Okay, and I did raise the neckline a little bit. I haven't done it on the pattern yet, but I'll show you that here coming up, how to do that. I just simply adjusted that when I cut out the actual fabric. I didn't adjust it on the pattern yet, but it was okay because I was able to bring the shoulder up because the arm side was lower. and actually lower than I wanted to. Still, the hem hung. I put it back on after I did that. I had cut it, took the seam out, cut it shorter, sewed it back together, put it back on. It was still longer than I wanted. So then I marked it with a pin of where I wanted that length to be and cut it and fixed the bottom at the same time. Okay. Then I put it back on. It was great. So then I marked on my pattern where that needed to be, where that needed to stop. So then I cut the pattern off, okay, to be at the right spot. So I have a good pattern now, with the exception of the neckline, which I'll show you how to fix. So it was a good fit, great. It was roomy enough. It worked really well. So I was done with the mock-up. So folded up the mock-up, put it back in my mock-up box, mock-up fabric box, and for use on something else. Okay, so now that my mock-up was done and my pattern was good, I cut this out of my actual fabric, and I'm going to show you quick how I did the fix for the neckline. Okay. Alright, so we have our front piece. Here's where you would put it on the fold at the center of your garment, and here's the neckline. Okay, now to fix the neckline, what I can do, and I'm just going to take a piece of scrap paper, and you want something with a good edge, and I'm going to put that in and just line it up so that this edge is straight. You can use a ruler. I'm just going to eyeball it. And I didn't bring the tape. And you just tape it in place. And this is just going to add, I'm just going to add just a tiny bit. I just want to straighten this neckline out so it is curved and not pointed. Okay? So, I'm basically just going to tape it in place just down here, because basically it's still going to follow the same curve. I don't want, and actually I could have used a lot smaller piece. Again, using my paper scissors, I'm gonna chop that off. Okay, so I just want the curve to come so that the bottom of it is perpendicular to this edge. So they're going to make a 90-degree angle when it gets to that point. So I'm going to cut it along this curve. Hard to see because of the shadow of the scissors, and then as I get down to the bottom, I'm going to turn outward and clip. So now that comes to a 90-degree angle here at the very tip, so that it's going to continue across. So if you folded this out, you can see that the direction this is going to go, it's going to go like this and back up. Okay, so that tiny little bit is the fix. And what I'm going to do then is I will turn this over and tape the back side so that the paper doesn't flop out. And you wouldn't have to have that much paper, but now that won't come and flop out at you. So now I'm good. If I ever need a different color camisole, or I want a different one or a different fabric, I've got a pattern that will work for me at my current size for the future. So I finished my mock-up, and I didn't have to, side note here, you don't have to finish your mock-up completely. Okay, you can stop where you are comfortable, where you can get the rest of the steps done on the actual garment without much problem. I just needed it for the fit, and that just meant sewing the shoulder seams and the side seams. Okay, so I moved on from there. I cut the pieces out of my actual cotton muslin fabric, sewed the shoulder seams, sewed the side seams. The next step was to do the felling of the seams, of the shoulder seams and the side seams. And I've lost that footage. Somehow it got deleted, so I'm going to actually show you on some scrap fabric how we do our felling, and then after that I will show you again on some scrap how I inserted that bias tape, and I will include the goof that I made for the bias tape. Okay, so I wanted to fell the side seams and stuff so they were nice and comfortable and flat. So I've just got a piece of fabric here that, you know, I've sewed two pieces together to get this seam allowance. Okay, so when you fell a seam, you're going to want to trim one side of the seam allowance shorter so that you can encase the seams. So what I'm going to do is you take one side of your seam allowance. See, there's the two layers, okay, and open it up a little bit, and so you're only trimming the one side. So I'm going to trim that down. Halfway. Okay, so you can see, if I put them back together, how this front one is shorter than the back one. I didn't have to trim the back one at all. If you have a wider seam allowance, you might want to trim this back one just so it isn't huge. This was already only a 1/4 inch seam allowance to start with, so sorry, I bumped the camera. So this was already, you know, pretty short. So this is about 1/8 of an inch. So to sew this, you're going to want to encase this seam allowance. So I'm going to open it out flat, and you want to fold this over the seam allowance and then over again. So with cotton and linen, you can kind of pinch it and crease it. You can also press this with an iron. It's a bit difficult to do on camera, but you can see what I'm doing here is we're going to fold that over. This is all going to encase that seam, and then this is going to be completely flat. And then we're going to sew tiny stitches along this edge to stitch this down. Okay? Okay, so like I said, you can fold this under and press it. You can fold it as you go. You can put a knot in the end of this. I'm just using some sewing thread. And I'm just going to take a couple of tiny little back stitches right at the end here. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. And I'm just going to leave a tiny little tail there, and then come back in and do another little back stitch right on top of it, and try not to pick my fingers. I haven't done a ton of hand sewing, so just a couple of little back stitches to secure it. And then you just want to make sure that this is tucked under, it's reasonably flat, reasonably straight, and that the back side, this seam allowance is fully opened up. You may want to press it open first, especially if you're just starting. I mean, I've practiced this a little bit, so I'm fairly comfortable. But what I'm going to do then is I'm just going to pick up a few threads along this side, and then a few threads at the fold there, and stitch along like that. So it's not terribly noticeable on the finished side of the garment. Just a few stitches. Okay, so that is not terribly noticeable on the other side. So here is my actual finished garment. It's hard to see the stitches, which is the whole point, but this is the machine sewn edge,
This is the hand sewn felled part. And then if you look on the main part, the only thing you can see really is the shadow of the you know, the second and third thicknesses of fabric underneath here. This is my nice soft cotton, and it worked out really, really well. I could barely see the stitches. I'm pretty proud of this piece. Okay, even though it's a simple garment, I was headed in the right direction, and I was pretty proud of my progress. And when you can do something simple and do it well, it sets your whole psyche up for a good result and a good feeling for yourself overall. Because I mean, let's face it, most people out there these days aren't out to make us feel good. We have to do that ourselves. So that was the felling seams. I also did the hem right afterwards in this similar fashion, but I just hemmed it. I folded it up and folded it under. And just as I went, and I pressed it in place on this because there's a slight curve to this. And then I went along and did kind of an overcast edge, this kind of a whip stitch, I guess. I'm not sure exactly what you call it, hem stitch. I did that, and you can barely see the stitches on the other side. So that is my hem. So now on to the bias tape. Okay, well, I lost my footage on the actual garment, so I'm showing you how I applied the bias tape. What we do is you open it up all the way on one edge like this, and then you figure out where your seam allowance is going to go, and that's where the fold is going to go. So if you have like a 1/4 inch seam allowance, you want to put it over slightly, you know, 1/2 inch, wherever your seam allowance runs. You might want to mark it on your fabric with a disappearing pen or something, but this fold is going to go about right where your seam allowance is. I'm just going to line it up with the edge because this is just a scrap piece of fabric, and it's going to be right sides to the right side. So you can use a zipper foot if you want. That will help you maybe line it up a little bit better. I'm just using my multi-purpose foot. And then this will like stretch around corners, you know, so it's really easy since it's cut in the bias. It will go around your corners corners or curves very easily, without bunching and stuff. So you can pin it along there first, especially if you've got corner or curves. That will help you do that. But what you just do, and my machine's a little loud, so I will stop talking while I'm sewing, but you're just gonna sew to the outside of this this fold. So I'm just gonna make sure my needle comes down like to the outside, just to the outside of that fold, and just sew along just outside the fold. Keep it lined up. Okay. I'm just going to pull the threads. It's just, like I said, just a trial run here. So you can see that when you can fold it back, so you won't see this at all. And so you can use a single fold, double fold, whatever you want to use. I used the double fold, and what I did at first was I pushed this back and turned it like I thought it was supposed to go, and then I sewed across here. That's not what you're supposed to do. I ended up unpicking that. And what you can do then is, what you're supposed to do is encase this seam allowance. So you can fold it over at the center fold, and then fold it again so that nothing shows on your right side. And then you can sew it with the machine, or what I did was I hand stitched this so that you can't see it very well. You can't see it on the right side of the garment, and I'll show you that on the actual garment. Okay, So that's bias tape. And if you, like I said, if you want to go around curves, it is super, not super stretchy, but stretchier, so that it'll follow your curves really nicely. Okay, so that was our bias tape, and this is it on the finished garment. Nice edge, you know, it's nice. And I actually sewed this with the machine, sewed it down with the machine, because I felt like I wanted that detail. You know, if it was supposed to be a decorative, you could put this in a different color if you wanted to. I did it with the machine because I wanted it to look really nice, and I wanted to see the stitch. And I'm not at the point where I really think that my hand stitching should be really noticed, you know, yet. It's not at a point where I'd like it to be noticed yet. So like I showed you in the video, or the prior clip, is that I attached the bias tape right sides together, folded it over twice, and then I sewed the seam here. And then I actually went along again and I sewed close to the edge, just because I wanted that edge to be really nice and crisp. And then I also did it at the armholes the same way. And it's a nice, I mean, you can see where there's two pieces of bias tape together there. It's a nice crisp finish. And next, I'll unveil the entire garment. Done. Okay, so at that point I was all finished, and all I had to do was iron it. Okay, so after the pressing was all finished, here she is. All done, nicely pressed, and it turned out great. It's a simple garment. It's very simple but very functional. It turned out very nice. I was very pleased with myself, how I finished it and everything. Yes, are there minor little things? Yes, of course, there's always going to be minor little things when you're doing it yourself. But the secret is, nobody's ever gonna notice them, because nobody's gonna look at it this close like you do. So don't let it bother you. Be proud of what you've sewed. So this is the finished garment, and this is it on. So nice, comfortable, makes the top appropriate to wear out and about. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've gained a bit of insight and some motivation to attempt your own garments. If you like what you've seen, please subscribe, click the like button, and click the notification bell down below so that you know when my new videos are going to be out. Please be creative, be willing to make mistakes, and be kind in the comments. See you next time.